Welcome to another episode of Getting into Information Security, where we talk with Infosec professionals and learn how they got into the field. I'm your host, Eamon Elswa. Today, my guest is Rob Carson, and we talk about his transition from the Marine Corps as an infantry officer to information security. Rob Carson is founder of Semper Sec. Rob knows how to simplify the problem and deliver solutions. And he likes to put things in perspective.
At the end of the day, I wasn't getting shot at. I worked at climate control, so people would be all stressed out. I'm like, well, no one's going to die. So it's okay. It's not great. They can only fire you. They're not going to kill you.
His distinguished career includes service as a Marine Corps Infantry Officer, as well as leading roles in IT and security.
It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I was nervous, though. What I figured out at first was that it was really just different weapon systems and how to employ them. And that's what I'm good at.
Rob built highly successful information security programs for ISO, PCI, HIPAA, NIST, and GDPR.
I used to have a full head of hair. A couple ISO projects later, it's gone.
He also volunteers his time as a Chief Security Officer for BSIDES Las Vegas, a nonprofit education organization designed to advance the body of information security. His clients include Fortune 200 companies, U.S. government contractors, state and local governments, fuel retailers, and software and hardware manufacturers. If you like today's episode, please share with your friends. And if you really like it, please leave a wonderful review on iTunes. If you have any questions, you can send me questions on Twitter at Coffee with Eamon or Eamon at gettingintoinfosec.com. Great. Let's get to the show. All right, Rob, thanks for coming on to the show. Appreciate your time.
Hey, happy to be here.
Great, thanks. So maybe we could start to tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess quick background. I'm from Colorado and I left to go to college at Texas A&M. Got my degree in maritime administration. So it's basically shipping logistics, which actually helped me out later on, believe it or not. But did that, graduated from that, also went through the Marine Officer program and became a Marine Corps Infantry Officer and did 7 years in the Marine Corps. Got my master's degree in management science from the University of Maryland. And then when I got out, I started as a project manager at a small MSSP because I was trying to figure out, what do I do? I figured out, I was basically a project manager. I did a lot of patrols. Those were all projects. Started a small MSSP, worked my way to VP of operations, and then left there to go to be the head of security for the back end of a large ITSM SaaS provider. And then last year I started Semper Sec and been on my own adventure.
That's awesome, man. Really good stuff. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's good. So tell me a little about the transition from going from the Marines to the private sector.
Oh, so it was an adventure. So I prepped a lot, but I had to learn a whole new vocabulary. So, when you get out, it's a totally different language, SMTP and email. I thought those were two different things. Did a whole project on that. And I totally confused when I first started out. But, the good part is the Marine Corps taught me a lot of leadership. So I was good at working with subject matter experts. And I had this team of super nerds that you just do great things. As long as I could buy pizza and Red Bull and keep the executives away from them and find DEF CON money, everybody was happy. But it was definitely an adventure. But, at the end of the day, I wasn't getting shot at. I worked at climate control, so people would be all stressed out. I'm like, well, no one's going to die. So it's okay. It's not great. They can only fire you. They're not going to kill you. It's great.
That's a good way to put it. And then with relations to information security, how was it to adapt into that?
So it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I was nervous, though. What I figured out at first was that it was really just different weapon systems and how to employ them. And that's what I'm good at. If I'm in the firewall, we're having a really bad day. And I used to be nervous about my lack of technical skills, but it turns out because I'm good at the logic and I understand how the business worked and how people work, I was able to fill my role very well. And it's one of those, okay, because Infosec now, it's almost like medicine, right? You've got heart surgeons, you got pediatricians, it's the same thing. If you need to do encryption, you go find an encryption guy. That's a thing. It's its own special snowflake. It's one of those, you're going to be good enough to know that you should go get a guy. And that's what I am, so, the way I describe it is it was fun. Leading people is awesome. And I like fighting bad guys. Granted, at the end of the day, I'm not saving people from a refugee zone or delivering, their first time to vote. It's corporate now, but watching people grow, that's one of the best things is some of the people I've hired, are doing amazing, and just learning how Infosec works, but really it's brilliance in the basics. At the end of the day, you got to have a program. You got to know what you're doing, and you need to be able to find the right people for that and call the right guy or person.
Okay. And then what about tooling up? So information security oftentimes has a steep learning curve. So yeah. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So what I did, I started getting my CISA, Certified Information Systems Auditor, because for me, I didn't have a tech background. I had a Wise phone. I didn't have a smartphone. Like I had the Zach Morris phone. It was, it was what it was. Like it wasn't that I was afraid of tech. It's just that like I didn't have a lot of tech.
Right.
And so you kind of had to drink the Kool-Aid is the best way to describe it. It's like joining a cult or something. Like it becomes your thing. It just becomes your thing. And you got to like embrace it and just not be afraid to ask. Like I asked a lot of questions. I had 3 whiteboards in my office. So my IT manager would come in and like, we had to just draw it out so I could figure out how these things actually work from a logical standpoint. But tooling up and I started tooling up on the compliance side because I know how to run programs. That was part of my background and overall management. I knew compliance from a safety standpoint, which isn't really any different. You're just mitigating risk. The risk I used to have to mitigate was how you do aerial sniper shots in nation states that may not be friendly. So you got to make sure your shots are clean. So different risk, but it's risk and figuring out you're still going to take risk. At the end of the day, if we wanted to be secure, we would just turn all this stuff off. Who knows?
Yeah, then you can't do anything if you turn.
So that's how I tooled up. I did that, and ISO 27001 was a big thing for me, like understanding compliance. And that's one of the things I tell people if they don't come from the tech side is don't be afraid that you're not techie. Just be who you are. The best thing is when you're dealing with engineers, like if you try to play buzzword bingo with them, they're going to own you. So just be like, hey, is this what this is called? Ask those questions and like making sure you're understanding. The compliance side is great because if you can audit, you understand how the business works, you know how processes work, you can fill a major niche inside of information security.
Okay. Yeah. And I think I'd like to get back to the transition part, but I think you touched upon something with the people part where you see people part as a really big part of your job right now, or even in transitioning. So can you talk about that?
I'd been a company commander, so I had 110 Marines. So I knew what it was like to lead, large groups. And I had also led small groups of subject matter experts. And so, when you're dealing with SMEs, it's paying the king a shilling, like asking their opinion first, not sitting there and, well, I read a book about it. Like, it's just throwing yourself into it, getting in there with them and like, hey, show me how to do this. Like, okay, like, what do I need to know? And asking those questions, like, what do I need to know? And filling your role. And that's where, like, for me, my transition, it was tough. Like I had a lot of things like DLP and like I literally had, you make friends, buy people lunch. I would have how like, the whole WebSense DLP, now it's FortiNet or whatever it's called now. But like that whole thing was explained to me over some ketchup bottles, a salt shaker right before we were doing an on-site project plan. Cause I could plan a project. I just had to understand like how it all worked. So It's just buy a lot of beer and don't be afraid to get your nerd on. Like going to the hacker conferences, like that was my pivotal piece. Like for me, it was like the first year I was just a PM and I was doing this. And then like I started getting into it and I really liked, the offensive side. I understood that. I understood the defensive side and running the internal security program. I started to, really start to understand it a little bit. And then I started going to DEF CON and that was huge. It was one of those,
that kind of like basically helped, shoot up your.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that I could go to the classes and like, there was something for me. No, there were some when they're throwing up command line, like that wasn't the class for me. Cause when I think of command line, I want to run Oregon Trail. I wish I could throw 4 lines of Python at a problem, but I'm not that guy. But you could go to the classes, just the talks and just meeting all the people and just getting involved in the community. Once I realized like we're all a bunch of deviant people. We're all strange in weird ways. And like we all fit in. Cause the cool part is it's all about who you are. They don't really care about where you come, like your skin, your ethnic, your sexual preference. It's more about what's in your brain housing group. And are you a good person or not? Like, are you trying to pretend cause like, let's face it, you go to DEF CON, like there is somebody smarter than you, probably at the bar stool next to you. So you got to be very careful. You learn how to humble yourself.
Right. I think humility is something you touched upon early on. So a little bit of humility and just going up to folks and asking them for some knowledge.
Oh yeah. And then building that network. Like I started volunteering. So that was one of the things too. We'd hired a bunch of guys from OWL group. They came in, we had gone to DEF CON and all that stuff. And they're like, hey, you got to go to DerbyCon, which I'm going to like tomorrow, actually.
Nice.
And I started volunteering there. Then I was having a conversation when I was there with a buddy. And all of a sudden this guy's like, hey, that'd be a great talk. Send it in. And all of a sudden, next thing me and my buddy are talking at GerCon and started doing talks. and just started to find my passion and find my place in the cyber landscape, if you will, what I'm good at, and being okay with that. But figuring out, like, I don't have to be afraid of not being the cloud architect. Mm-hmm. It's okay. There's a guy for that, but I can do my part.
Yeah, a lot of people, they see all these superstars and they feel like, oh, how am I going to get into this field, or how am I going to be as good as them? So that's really good to hear. That's really good to hear. So what makes you successful in your job today?
I think it's empathy. So, like I was just talking to a customer today, and, they're at that transition point. Like, a lot of times I work with customers that are in that SMB space that are going from, either the outsource IT, the one-man IT shop, but all of a sudden they've got these compliance requirements for them to grow, and they're trying to figure out how to do it. And it's one of those, like, helping to understand, like, hey, I know what you had to do to get here, and I understand it's duct tape and super glue. We're going to change, we're going to grow, but don't feel bad about what it is. Let's start making that continual improvement. Hey, we can't send that stuff to personal email accounts. Like, let's got to mature. I remember, putting in the security program, like, we had what we had. I had RSA and Vision. It was awful, Yeah. It's like, okay, your two-factor is SMS. We know that's not the greatest two-factor out there. We know it's easily spoofable and stuff like that, but it's still one of those, like, helping people get to the baseline so they can keep growing and go, hey, it's okay. Like, you at least have that. Let's worry about the stuff you don't even have. Like, that's where, like, when people say, oh, compliance sucks, like, I look at it as, like, if you can't do compliance, you're not ready for any real cybersecurity. But helping them not try to boil the ocean. Like, I used to have a full head of hair. Like, a couple ISO projects later, like, it's gone. Like, you can't do it all at once, and understand, like,
right.
At the end of the day, people are doing the best they can with what they've got, and helping them spread the gospel, if you will, of Infosec, and making sure the message resonates, and helping, what helps me now, a lot of it is helping to understand, some of the most passionate people in the world, where they're ready to die on that hill for something silly, or it's like, hey, I get it, but you know what? At the end of the day, like, if you're in a corporate environment, right?
Yeah.
Typically they care about two things. Did you get hacked? Did you pass your audit? Can we sell? So how does your message resonate with what matters, and not trying to protect everything. Let's just protect what's most critical to the customer. So they stop trying to worry about all the things that don't matter. You go, okay, this is the crown jewels. This is what we're going to care about first.
Right. It's about, like you said, not trying to boil the ocean. So coming in there, taking some baby steps, increasing that security maturity, quote unquote. But, taking baby steps as opposed to coming in Chicken Little, sky's falling, right? Yeah,
exactly. And simplifying the solution. Half of it's like, because I used to over-engineer stuff. I've made policies for the sake of policies. Like, I've done it. Like, that's the thing is, like, I call myself a lessons learned enthusiast.
Oh, okay. I like that.
I like to learn the hard way a lot of times of, like, how not to do it. So that's why I tell customers, like, well, don't do it that way. I did it that way. It didn't work. Let me tell you why. But explaining, having that strategy of, like, okay, working through those programs and helping them understand, okay, hey, you don't want to do it that way. That's going to be a bad idea. I know that sounds great in theory, but you need to push that responsibility someplace else. Because you know what? It's not your decision. You let the business owner sign off on that. And that's a great way to start solving problems. That's why coaching, a lot of it's just coaching and going, hey, well, if you can get your boss to sign off on that, that's great. And the boss is like, well, I'm not going to sign off on you having some stupid game on your laptop that gets hacked and it hacks the whole company. Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Our job is to let them know the full picture, right?
Because it's not a security business. Typically, unless you're in it, even if you're in an MSSP or in a security company, you're only doing security so you can sell and make more money. You're not doing it just because the hackers are coming. You're doing it to protect revenue.
Yeah. Unless you're an actual security company, right? Which is like, then your reputation's on it and all that. But
your reputation matters. But it's like, there's a great quote. I'm giving a talk on guerrilla warfare in a few weeks here. A great quote from John F. Kennedy, where he was basically talking to, they were asking about the space program. And he was like, I don't care about putting a man on the moon. But what he did care about was beating the Russians.
There you go.
And that's what it's like, people understanding, like, hey, don't feel bad they don't care about your program. Find out what they care about and go.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. And now a message from our sponsor. Are you faced with too many email alerts and notifications? Don't have the time to create filters or set preventative or even corrective controls in your environment? Wish you had a SOC to take care of all the digging through logs and false positives? Well, we have a solution for you. The USB SOC. Simply plug in the USB disk and using the latest AI and machine learning, it will go through your inbox and notifications and do all the work for you. Just give it all your credentials and it will log into your SIM, verify if it's an incident or not, and log into your environment and remediate the change. But wait, there's more. If you act now, we'll also include the Preventative Feature Pack. The Preventative Pack will enable controls in your environment to prevent such an occurrence again. So that user that's always opening 0/0 security groups to the world will have their permissions removed and sent a friendly notification. This is all done with the latest AI and blockchain technology. Order the USB stock today for 3 easy payments of $19.99. Help improve your work-life balance. So I remember when we talked last time, we had this whole metrics program put together, and it sounded pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about that and how some of your military experience kind of helped influence that?
Sure. So, it's one of those things, you can't manage what you can't measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, you have 2 big metrics, right? There's a lot of stuff that boils up into that, right? So how do you make sure you're going to pass your audit? How do you stay at that 90% audit ready? When you go into the audit for the actual cert or whatever, that third-party audit, there should be no surprises. You ought to find something, it should be oh, we didn't know about that. Holy cow. You shouldn't be shocked. So what I do is I put metrics together that I truly define the metric, where I'm breaking out how we're going to do it. Okay, so the metric, it's here to meet this control. So let's say and it's not necessarily, are we stopping hackers with a process? Let's say it's offboarding, or onboarding. Number of employees onboarded versus background checks, because we're just trying to make sure we're doing our background checks. And the goal of it is, does this process happen? Because you don't want to find out that you haven't been doing background checks because HR decided that hurt people's feelings or something. I don't know.
Right.
And so it's...
Well, you don't trust me?
Yeah, exactly. And so you build it out and you define how you're going to measure it. So you measure it the same way every time. So the idea is that you can give that to somebody else to do. And also the biggest thing is that red, yellow, green at the end of it. The so what? If you're not making a decision off of that metric, what is the point? You should go offboarding or onboarding, right? So there should be, hey, we have a problem and we need to have a meeting and there needs to be action taken to figure out why this process isn't working, right? There should be some definitive action that comes from it. Otherwise, okay. If you're not going to do anything about it, then don't measure it. And I say with the Marine Corps, the tie-in with the military part, it's keeping stuff simple. Again, I call it, breaking it down Barney style, because they're humans. We're all working our butts off. And most people aren't nefarious. People are trying to do the right thing, and so it's to alleviate the concern and keeping stuff less stressful. It's that's why you just make it clearly defined. So it's a repeatable process. And then you figure out okay, let's say when you first start it, you have 10 metrics. Your goal should be maybe the first round, you're just trying to get 25% of them automated. And then your future goals is okay, how can we automate the rest of these things so we don't have to go collect them?
What is your advice to folks, particularly in the military, looking to transition into information security? What is something that you think would benefit them, or what are some steps they could take?
Oh, good question. So I would say start joining the local chapters. So if you're
chapters of
chapter ISSA, Cloud Security Alliance, ISACA, whatever it is, start going. And it's okay to say, I'm a noob, I don't know, but don't be scared and don't be afraid. I was an infantry officer. I barely had a computer half the time because I had a rifle and a radio. So it's one of those, don't be afraid of it and understand it's more than that. Military guys, we all do this stupid information assurance stuff where it's you do this online training once a year so you can keep your email address. And it's usually pretty awful. It's much more than that. And don't be afraid. There's a ton of veterans in there and there's a lot of veterans programs that they're trying to recruit to get people in. And, to understand the first job you get is the hardest job you'll ever get in Infosec. That'll be the hardest job to get, is that first step in. But, there's multiple ways to get in, either through the compliance side or project management side, or you can go to a school and get a cert. I got my PMP when I got out.
Okay.
So that helped quantify what I did, because it's one of those things, if your resume says you were a jungle warfare specialist, well, that's great. But guess what, guys? Nobody's hiring a jungle warfare specialist. So it's not relevant. Or why would it be relevant to the job? If it's not relevant, you got to cut it out. And it's hard. It's one of those, I taught urban combat in Moldova. I was super excited about that. Yay. And guess what? It's not on my resume because you know what? Nobody cares. It's a cool story, but it's not relevant to what I was trying to get hired for. So, understanding that, and if you're still in, start training out. Go get a cert. Go get a Security Plus. Get that. That's a great entry level cert. I wouldn't go try to go get your CISSP, because if you have your CISSP and you have no experience, it's not going to do you any good.
Right.
In my humble opinion, like, I think it's better to, if you have the experience, go get the CISSP, but, go get a cert, get something that resonates, because, and you don't have to have a college degree, and it's probably bad. I've got a master's degree, but understand this. Like, I've hired two of my top engineers. One of them had a GED with a 200 level IQ, and the other kid, he's got 2 years of college and he's making $170 a year now. Like, you don't have to have a degree, but you do have to have the aptitude and attitude and the drive, which most military people do. Like, we don't understand 9 to 5. Like, you go home when it's time to go home. And that's how it is in Infosec. The hackers don't show up at 9 a.m. on Tuesday after your first cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be nice. It doesn't work that way. So, like, it's one of those, look at those veteran training programs, because there's a ton of them that'll get you straight in and get that entry level job. Go make your bones in a SOC, in Security Operations Center.
Yeah.
Because, you'll start off low, but low pay and even in Infosec is not very low. Mm-hmm. And, like, it will go very fast. I hired a girl from the help desk, and within 2.5, 3 years, she went from 40 to 80, because she was awesome.
Yeah.
But she drank the Kool-Aid too. That's the other part is, just like in the military, I had a first sergeant that told me your hobbies should reflect part of your career. Right. That was a great piece of advice. As an infantry officer, like, you should be out hiking on the weekends or shooting rifles, or you should be, your hobbies should help what you do.
That's cool.
Like, volunteering at Infosec conferences, like, that's a great place to meet people. Because if you're there and you're volunteering, like, you're going to make friends right away. Like, I'm a CSO for Las Vegas BSIDES. Like, that's a great place to come out and meet people and, like, just make connections, because people are looking, and if they have a choice, because when they're hiring entry level security people, they know they're going to have to train them. And there's a million of people want that job. So the way you're going to get it is somebody goes, the dude's he's passionate about it.
Right. Like, passion. There you go. Yeah. And I think the Kool-Aid part you mentioned too, because, you don't expect to be spoon fed, right?
No.
You got to go out there and maybe, I mean, I've never been in the military, but, is that something where in the military, they kind of just train you to do X, Y, Z? Is there any mental adaptation necessary to transition?
Yes and no. So some of the adaptation that you will have to deal with is some of your bosses might suck.
Really?
I think the military, at least the Marine Corps, in my humble opinion, does a great job of leadership training.
Okay.
And I made a lot of my mistakes as a second lieutenant. I think if there's any Marines listening to this that were my lance corporals at the time, they'd probably be able to tell you some stories. But they don't do a very good job of leadership training in the civilian world. It's a lot of times people get promoted because they're good at something, so they put them in charge, but they don't really know how to be a leader. And they aren't going to care as much about your personal whatever as we do in the military.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's one of those, like, you should know your people, but it's not always the same way for everybody. And so understanding, like, the same level you might be used to, even if you didn't think it was all that great, it can be worse. But if you have that drive and motivation, you can sail right through it. I would say that, and other adaptations, like, so if you're getting out, this is what I'll tell you what I did. There's a set of podcast tools called How to Interview series, manager tools. Best thing ever. I went to Steps and Taps twice. It was terrible. So that's actually the best set of how to interview stuff. Like, I literally would record myself every night answering 3 or 4 questions, explaining, like, why that was relevant to something, practicing, train how you fight, just like we did in the military. Same thing applies in the civilian world. Train how you fight. And then I would videotape myself once a week, because my wife would tell me I would start knife handing and, like, scowling at people when I'd start talking about something. I was like, no, honey. And like, turns out, like, I watched the video. She's like, well, watch the video. Oh, okay. And, like, learn how to smile and, like, understand that. I'd say the other transition too is the military's definitely done a lot of transition. I think the generation, the newest generation, the millennial generation, like, technically I'm a senior millennial depending on what article I read, but, understand that if you came from the infantry, like, at my time, there weren't any women in the infantry. So the rough housing, the stuff that goes on, is different, and, a little different level of professionalism. But at the same time, you're in an AC. It's great.
You're in AC. Climate control.
It's not that bad. Remind yourself, like, you ain't getting shot at. It's okay. The other thing too, like, I remember, funny story. So I was all nervous about how to dress, right? Because in the military, you have a uniform. That is probably the one thing that was hard for me, was how to dress. Because you know what to wear every day, and it's told, like, that. It's pretty. It's solved for you.
Yeah.
And, like, so when I interviewed at my first company, like, I met these guys. This guy was like in a tap out t-shirt and jean shorts, whatever. And then and I talked to my boss. She's like, yeah, just wear, cargo shorts and a t-shirt or whatever. And I wore like a collared shirt, but and they happened that day, they were messing with each other and they were all dressed up in suits. And I'm like, what the heck? I got all confused. So, but I would tell you, if you want to be noticed, don't dress sloppy. Sometimes you have to tell engineers, like, you've worn that same shirt for the last 3 days. Have you showered? Do you have more than one shirt? And that's the thing. So, get some clothes, but it's one of those things, like, the best thing to do is kind of watch how people dress, like, talk to somebody, figure that part out. Like, it's one of those, it's not a big deal, but first impressions matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so
you could ask a recruiter. I mean, you could even ask a recruiter, hey, what's the dress code? What do all that stuff.
I would tell people for an interview, though, wear a suit. I don't care. They have jobs. You're trying to get a job. You should be dressed in the I need to get a job clothes. They have I already have a job clothes.
Yeah, that's true. Although I found it actually kind of sometimes backfires with like the younger startups these days and things like that. So,
well, that's why I have skulls. I have a skull liner. So I have skulls in my suit. So it's still cool. But you're right. Like, you got to be careful. And the other thing is, like, lighten up. Like, that's why, like, videotape yourself. Like, learn how to smile. Like, don't be so. One of the other things that was tough to transition is calling everybody sir and ma'am.
Oh, interesting.
Like, calling my boss Rob was like, 'cause his name was Rob too, was weird. And it's a thing that, like, there's nothing wrong with being polite, but as you move up, you got to be careful. And
you got to fit in.
You have to be able to use first names and be comfortable. And it's going to be weird at first. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be weird, but yeah, I would say that was one of the things now that I'm thinking about it, I'm coming back to, like, oh yeah, I had trouble with that. Oh, and people don't start meetings on time. Sometimes the corporate culture can be very, very painful.
I know.
Like, so understand that, take a breath. You're not getting shot at. Like, you don't need to be 15 minutes early. That's the other part, though, is if the meeting's supposed to start at 10, make sure you're there, dialed in.
Yeah.
5 to 10 or 2 minutes ahead of time is fine.
Right.
But you don't need to be 15 minutes early because they're still on another call. They're doing something else. Like, they're not, like, nobody's going to be 15 minutes early.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff to unpack here. Go ahead.
Yeah. Don't show up for your interview like 30 minutes early or something like that. Cause then it's like, what am I supposed to do with you? Cause you got to understand. That's what I tell people too, is like, somebody who's hired lots of people, 1 page. Your resume should be 1 page, unless, like, if you're getting out of the military, if you got less than 10 years in the world, like, 1 page. Because I'm not going to read past that. So you got to catch my attention in the very beginning, and you're going into 3 folders: A, B, and C. A, I want to call right away. B, I'll call if I don't find any A's. And C, why did this person apply? And you've got to go and think of it as phase lines too. So your job is get the phone interview, get a resume good enough to get the phone interview, ace the phone interview, then get the on-site, get the offer. Then you can decide if you don't want to take it or not. Oh, and and if you're probably not going to be any good at negotiation. So, and if you're arguing with me about $2,000, you're not going to see it in your paycheck. So it's not really going to matter. Like, it's one of those, like, you got to make sure you're inside you can be outside the box, but you need to stay inside the room. Like, but if the only time you negotiate is if, like, there's like a $30,000 gap or 10, there's something significant that is a deal killer. But
especially on your first job, right? Especially
on your first job. And when you're getting out, like, what I did is I used my base pay rate as my salary request. I cut out the BAH and the other stuff, because when you're in the military, you can look at these things and it'll say, like, oh, I made $90,000. Well, yeah, but your base pay is this, and you got to be willing to start there. Like, I started, and I'll share this. Like, I went from like 57 to, I cleared in the first 3 years. I went from 57 to like 120. So don't be afraid that, like, and that's what the cool part about the startups is. The startups, that can happen there. It's pretty unheard of. But if you go to big corporate, you're going to get your 3 to 5% raise every year. Like, that's what it is. And that's why I would tell you, when you go to those job fairs, they're depressing. They're great for free pens and recon, but don't be afraid to talk to the small guys there, because that's where the opportunity is. Like, there's 1 million people in line for Lockheed, and don't be afraid. Don't be scared, because, like, what are they going to do? Say no? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, 6 months out, start crafting the resume and have people look at it. Go to Steps and Taps if you can. 90 days out, or about that point, you should be recording yourself and practicing answering questions. And that's when you can start applying. Because, like, the other part is, you can't apply for a job you're not available for 6 months. Like, they're trying to fill that spot now.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a lot on military transition. So what drives you in information security? Why are you in the field? Where did you get the idea to get into information security? Younger, when you're in the military?
No, it was honestly like I had 2 PM job offers at the same time. One was with a big corporate company, and then one was with where I went. And the big corporate one was a higher salary, actually. But I would have been doing the same thing, and it would have been boring. Like,
there you go.
I didn't know anything about Infosec. And the cool part is, like, it's a negative unemployment industry. Like, people aren't making less data. It's still exciting. Like, there's still so much stuff to learn, and nobody's an expert anymore at all of it. They can't be. It's fun because you get to channel your inner criminal too. It's like, to be good at the blue team, you got to think like a criminal and go, well, how would I hack this place? Okay, this is what I got to fix. Stop that.
Yeah.
Like, I'd say the passion is like, it's the adventure. Like, it's always new, and you're helping people, and you're stopping, maybe you're stopping bad guys, I mean, I fight bad guys with a keyboard now. It's not as sexy, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of parallels, I think, from transition from military to information security. You are trying to protect something at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Good. This is great. I definitely see a second episode with us in the future. So from a PM, and I have a friend actually that is a PM and he wants to transition to information security. What are some things you would recommend to him?
So understand that, like, he may not be able to command the same. It depends on what industry he's in. Like, let's say he's in construction. Okay. It's different stuff. Like, let's say you're paid $100,000. I'm just using round numbers here in construction, right? Like, you may have to go back to 80 to go back up to 120. Because a PM and InfoSec, a good one, they're easily 120, 150, like the top notch ones, but they have a lot of experience in security. They know SDLC, they know these different pieces. They know how to put the pieces together and herd the nerds. They know how to go, when the engineer says it'll take me 2 hours, that means 2 days.
Yeah. Scotty, I need my engines now. There you go. Yeah. So, dude, tell me some war stories. You got any war stories to share?
I got to sanitize it, and I got to think through it's when people are freaking out during DR, like, don't yell at your people. I've been yelled at. Like, don't yell at people during DR.
All right, dude. This is awesome. Thanks so much.
It was awesome.
I think there's a lot to be said about those transitioning.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, at DEF CON, some random person came up to me and asked me, hey, I just came out of the Army, where do I go? I installed Kali Linux and what do I do? So, but you got to start somewhere.
You got to start and just be humble and just drink the Kool-Aid. Join the cult. Gotta literally, like, you just gotta, like, embrace it and understand that, like, there's a lot of important people. They'll tell you. It's like Navy SEALs. Like, they'll be sure to let you know how important they are. But, like, most people are pretty humble, and, like, as long as you're just asking questions and trying to learn and, like, being honest, not trying to play buzzword bingo with things you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah. Cool, man.
Because you read a book on blockchain doesn't make you a blockchain expert.
Blockchain. There you go.
All right. Well, have a good one.
Alrighty. I hope you had as much fun listening as I did. Rob is a great guy, and really had a great time talking with him and getting to know, how it was to get out from the military and transition. So I hope that you found it beneficial as I did. And again, if you like this show or any of my other shows, please leave an awesome rating on iTunes. And we'd love to know more about you guys. Go ahead and sign up on my email list at gettingintoinfosec.com. There you could find a link to sign up. And if you found this show useful for yourself, please share it and let me know. If you have any questions on information security, feel free to ask on Twitter at Coffee with Eamon, or shoot me an email, eamon@gettingintoinfosec.com. Every week I let my guests pick their outro music, and this week it's country and rock. Enjoy.